The steering wheel jerked so hard it nearly ripped out of my hands. I remember the sound first, this awful hollow clunk followed by a violent rattling that didn't belong in a car that had just passed inspection 2 months prior. The front end dipped, then shuddered like it was trying to tear itself apart. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles going white, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. What in the... And then the left side dropped. The car lurched, metal scraping asphalt, in a scream that echoed across the empty county road. I felt the wheel spin uselessly beneath my palms. The car wasn't responding anymore, it was falling apart. The left front corner slammed down, sparks flying, the whole vehicle dragging sideways like it had a mind of its own. I hit the brake, but it didn't matter. There's a moment right before impact where everything goes quiet. Not peaceful, just suspended, like time is holding its breath. That's when I realized something that didn't make any sense. My wheel wasn't there anymore. The car slammed into the ditch with a jolt that snapped my head forward. My chest hit the seatbelt hard enough to knock the air out of me. Something cracked, maybe the fender, maybe the axle, maybe something inside me. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. And then there was silence. I sat there gripping the wheel that no longer controlled anything, staring out at the slanted horizon through a cracked windshield. Dust drifted lazily in the sunlight. My ears rang. I was alive. But I shouldn't have been. Somewhere in the distance I heard a dog barking. A screen door slammed, footsteps, voices. Ma'am, can you hear me?" I tried to answer, but my voice came out thin and strange. "My wheel," I whispered. One of the men later I'd learn his name was Harold walked a few yards back toward the road. I watched him squint, then bend down slowly. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "What is it?" another voice asked. Harold didn't answer right away. Then he looked back at me, his face tight, uneasy. "Your wheel's about 20 feet back," he said. "Clean off." Clean off. That was the word that stuck with me. Because wheels don't just come clean off. I'm telling you this now from my living room 6 months later with a cup of tea gone cold beside me and a blanket across my lap I don't really need. My ribs healed. The bruises faded. The car's long gone. But the truth, that's something that doesn't fade quite so easily. My name is Diana Carter. I'm 62 years old, retired after 37 years as a school secretary in a small town just outside Dayton, Ohio. I've lived a quiet life, paid my bills, took care of people when they needed it, tried not to ask for much in return. If you had asked me a year ago what mattered most, I would have said family. I wouldn't say that so quickly now. Back then, my world was simple. I lived in the same modest ranch house my late husband and I bought in 1989. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a yard I kept trimmed myself. My days were filled with routine morning coffee crossword puzzles, the occasional trip to the grocery store or church on Sundays. And then there was my grandfather. He was 93 when he passed, lived out on the edge of town in the same farmhouse he'd owned since before I was born, stubborn as a mule, sharp as a tack right up until the end. I visited him 3 times a week, sometimes more, brought groceries, helped with his medication, sat with him on the porch while he told the same stories I'd heard 100 times before. I never minded. Someone had to be there. My parents lived 10 minutes away, but they were always busy. My mother with her bridge club, my father with his endless projects in the garage that never quite got finished. And my sister Linda lived 25 minutes away in a house twice the size of mine with granite countertops, and a husband who made good money in real estate. She had time for vacations, for shopping trips, for posting smiling pictures online. But not much time for Grandpa. Still, she had a way of showing up when it counted, or at least when it mattered. That's how it always was with Linda. Growing up, she was the golden child. Pretty charming, always knew just what to say to get people on her side. I was the dependable one, the one who helped, who fixed things, who stayed quiet when things got uncomfortable. "You're so strong, Diana," my mother used to say. It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I remember because I had written it down on my calendar in blue ink circled twice. The lawyer's office was downtown right near the courthouse, 10 o'clock sharp. Linda had called me the night before. "Well, tomorrow's the big day," she said, her voice light, almost playful. "You nervous?" Nervous about what I asked. "Oh, I don't know," she said. "You did spend a lot of time with Grandpa. People might get the wrong idea." I frowned. What wrong idea? That you were influencing him. The word hung there sour and heavy. I took care of him, Linda, I said, keeping my voice steady. I know, she replied quickly. I'm just saying how it might look. You know how people talk. People. She always hid behind that word. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, and ended the call. I didn't sleep well that night. The morning of the crash, everything felt off. Not in a way I could explain, just little things. The coffee tasted bitter. The sky looked too bright. Even the house felt quieter than usual, like it was waiting for something. I got dressed carefully. Navy slacks, cream blouse, the pearl earrings my husband had given me years ago. I wanted to look presentable, respectful. For Grandpa. I grabbed my purse, checked the time, 9:15, and headed out to the car. It was a mild morning, early spring. The air still carried a chill, but the sun was out, promising warmth later in the day. I unlocked the car, slid into the driver's seat, and paused. Something felt different. I shook my head, probably just nerves. The engine started without issue. I backed out of the driveway, turned onto the main road, and began the 15-minute drive into town. For the first few miles, everything was normal. And then just as I turned onto County Road 17, that sound. That awful hollow clunk. Later at the repair shop, the mechanic, a man named Pete, who'd worked on my car for years, stood there shaking his head. I've been doing this 30 years, he said, holding up a small greasy piece of metal. I've never seen all 5 lug nuts come off at once unless someone took them off. I stared at him. Are you saying... I'm saying, he interrupted gently, this wasn't wear and tear. My throat went dry. Then what was it? Pete looked me straight in the eye. Ma'am, he said quietly, somebody loosened those lug nuts. The room seemed to tilt just like the car had. And in that moment something inside me shifted. Because accidents happen. But this wasn't an accident. And whether I wanted to believe it or not, someone had meant for me to crash. Part 1. The crash. That wasn't an accident. 1,032 words. Continue. Part 2. A lifetime of being overlooked. When you live long enough, you start to recognize patterns. Not the obvious ones, the birthdays, the holidays, the yearly doctor visits, but the quieter rhythms underneath. The way certain people always get the benefit of the doubt. The way others are expected to carry the weight without complaint. The way love in some families isn't handed out evenly, it's measured, rationed, and sometimes withheld entirely. I didn't always have the words for it, but I felt it early. Linda was 5 years younger than me, and from the moment she could walk into a room and make people smile, everything shifted. I don't say that with bitterness, not anymore. It's just the truth. She had this way about her. Big eyes, easy laugh, a kind of softness that made people want to protect her. Teachers adored her. Neighbors brought her cookies. My parents, well, they lit up around her in a way they never quite did with me. I was the quiet one, the helper. Diana, can you set the table? Diana, watch your sister for a minute. Diana, don't make a fuss. I didn't mind, not at first. There's a certain pride that comes with being reliable, with being the one people count on. Even as a child, I liked knowing I could make things run smoothly, that I could fix problems before they became bigger ones. But over time, you start to notice something. Being reliable doesn't always mean being appreciated. Sometimes it just means being expected. I remember one Christmas must have been 1974 or 75. I was maybe 10, Linda 5. I'd spent weeks saving my allowance to buy my mother a small perfume set from the drugstore. It wasn't fancy, but it came in a little box with gold trim, and I thought it looked beautiful. On Christmas morning, Linda handed Mom a lopsided, glitter-covered ornament she'd made at school, glue still visible in places, the string uneven. Mom gasped like she'd been given diamonds. "Oh, Linda, this is perfect," she said, pulling her into a hug. When it was my turn, Mom smiled politely. "That's nice, Diana," she said, setting the box aside. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a gift. But moments like that, they add up. As we got older, the roles became clearer. Linda dated, went to parties, lived her life out loud. I studied, worked part-time, helped around the house. When I got accepted to a local community college, my parents nodded. "That's practical," my father said. When Linda barely graduated high school, they threw her a party. "She's got so much potential," Mom told everyone. Potential. That was always Linda's word. Mine was dependable. I married young 22. His name was Robert. He worked at a manufacturing plant just outside town. Good man, steady, kind in the ways that matter most. We didn't have children. Not for lack of trying, it just wasn't in the cards for us. We made peace with it over time, built a quiet life together instead. Bought the little ranch house I still live in, took weekend drives, hosted modest dinners. Linda married later, but when she did, she married well. Tom was in real estate, ambitious, charismatic, the kind of man who always seemed to be closing a deal or heading to a meeting. They moved into a big house with tall windows and a kitchen that looked like something out of a magazine. My parents couldn't stop talking about it. "Have you seen Linda's place?" Mom would say. "It's just gorgeous." I'd smile. I'm glad she's happy. And I meant it. Or at least I tried to. When Robert passed heart attack quick and unexpected, I was 56. That's a strange age to start over. Too old to feel young, too young to feel finished. The house got quieter after that. Even the walls seemed to echo differently. I kept myself busy, took on more hours at the school, organized files, answered phones, made sure everything ran the way it was supposed to. At home, I settled into routine. Routine can be a comfort when there's no one left to share the silence. That's when I started spending more time with Grandpa. He'd always been there in the background of my life. Strong hands, firm handshake, a voice that carried authority without ever needing to raise it. After Grandma passed, he grew quieter but not weaker. "Don't you worry about me," he'd say whenever I offered help. "I've been taking care of myself longer than you've been alive." Still, he let me in. At first it was small things, dropping off groceries, fixing a leaky faucet, driving him to appointments. Then it became more. I'd sit with him on the porch in the evenings, the two of us watching the sun dip behind the fields. "You always show up, Diana," he said to me once out of nowhere. I shrugged. Somebody should. He looked at me, really looked. "Not everybody does," he said. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just sat there listening to the crickets, feeling something in my chest loosen just a little. Linda came around occasionally. Birthdays, holidays, the kind of visits that could be scheduled and posted about afterward. She'd sweep in with a bright smile, kiss Grandpa on the cheek, take a few pictures. "How are you holding up?" she'd ask, already halfway to her next sentence. "Still here," Grandpa would reply dryly. She'd laugh, not quite catching the tone. Good, we should do this more often." We didn't. When Grandpa's health started to decline, nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age, I stepped in more. Medications, doctor visits, making sure he ate properly. My parents, they visited less. "It's just so hard to see him like that," Mom would say. Linda, she sent flowers. I didn't keep score. But I noticed. About a month before he passed, Grandpa called me into the living room. He was sitting in his old armchair, the one with the worn leather and the small tear on the left armrest. "Sit down," he said. I did. He reached over to the side table and picked up a folder. "I've been putting some things in order," he said. "You know, making sure everything's taken care of." I nodded. "Good," I said softly. He handed me the folder. "I want you to have this," he said. I hesitated. "Grandpa, I don't—" "Just take it," he said, not unkindly. I did. Inside were documents, property papers, notes written in his careful, deliberate handwriting. "I've made arrangements," he continued. "Everything's clear, no confusion." I swallowed. "You don't have to worry about that right now," I said. "I'm not worried," he replied. "I just don't want you to be." Something in his voice made me look up. "Why would I be?" I asked. He held my gaze for a long moment. "Because not everyone in this family sees things the way I do," he said. The will reading was set for the following Tuesday. Linda called me more in that week than she had in months. Checking in, asking how I was doing, offering to meet for coffee. It was unusual. Too unusual. "You've been spending a lot of time with Grandpa," she said casually during one call. "Yes," I replied. "That's good of you," she said. There was a pause. Then lightly, "I just hope everything's fair." Fair. That word again. "I never asked for anything, Linda," I said. "I know," she replied quickly. "I'm just saying it should be equal. You know how families can get." Families. There it was. That subtle shift, that undercurrent. I felt it then clearer than ever. Not love. Not concern. Something else. Something sharper. Looking back now, I can see it all lined up. The calls, the questions, the sudden interest. The way she said my name like she was trying it on after years of not using it. I should have trusted that feeling. Should have listened to that quiet voice in the back of my mind that said something wasn't right. But when you've spent a lifetime being the one who keeps the peace, you learn to ignore that voice. You tell yourself you're imagining things. That family is family. That no one would go that far. I believed that. Right up until the moment my wheel came off on County Road 17. Part 2. A lifetime of being overlooked. 1,041 words. Continue. Part 3. The day everything fell apart. The morning of the will reading started like any other Tuesday. That's what unsettles me the most even now. Not the crash, not the pain, not even what I learned afterward. It's how ordinary everything felt right up until it wasn't. I woke up at 6:30, the same time I had for decades when I was still working at the school. Old habits don't fade easily. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep into your bones. I made my coffee, stood at the kitchen window, and watched the neighbor's dog trot along the fence line like he always did. Routine. Comforting, predictable. Safe. I remember thinking that word safe as I sipped my coffee. It's strange the things your mind clings to. I dressed with more care than usual. Not because I expected anything grand from the will reading, but because it felt important, like showing up mattered, like Grandpa deserved that much. Navy slacks, cream blouse, a light cardigan, the pearl earrings Robert gave me on our 10th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. "You're just going to a meeting," I said out loud. But it didn't feel like just a meeting. It felt like something was ending. Or beginning. I couldn't tell which. At 8:45, I stepped outside. The air had that early spring crispness to it, not quite warm, not quite cold. The kind of morning that promises change. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. A breeze rustled through the trees. Everything looked normal. Too normal. My car sat in the driveway where it always did. A little older now, but reliable. I took care of it. Oil changes on time, tire rotations, regular checkups with Pete down at the shop. I unlocked the door and paused. There it was again. That feeling. Not fear exactly, just unease. Like walking into a room and forgetting why you came there. I glanced around. Across the street, Mrs. Klein was watering her flowers. "Morning, Diana," she called. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. She hesitated, then added, "Someone was around your car late last night." My hand froze on the door handle. "What do you mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "I couldn't sleep, so I was up watching TV. Around, maybe 10 or so, I saw a figure near your driveway. Thought it might be you at first, but then I realized your lights were off." My stomach tightened. "Did you see who it was?" I asked. She shook her head. "Too dark. Probably nothing. Kids, maybe." Kids. We didn't have many of those around here anymore. Probably, I said, though it didn't sit right. I thanked her, got into the car, and closed the door. For a moment, I just sat there, listening. The faint hum of the engine, the ticking of the dashboard clock, my own breathing a little too fast. "You're being silly," I muttered. I turned the key. The engine started smoothly. No warning lights. No strange sounds. Just a car doing what it was supposed to do. The first few miles were uneventful. I drove past the elementary school where I'd spent most of my working life. The parking lot was already filling up, teachers arriving, kids being dropped off. I felt a pang of something nostalgia, maybe. Then I passed the diner where Robert and I used to have breakfast on Sundays. Memory after memory, quiet and familiar. It grounded me. Made everything feel normal again. At 9:12, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Linda. Of course. I let it ring once, twice, then answered through the car's speaker. "Hello." "Hey, sis." Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. Too cheerful. "Hi," I said. "You on your way?" "Yes," I replied. "I should be there in about 15 minutes. "Good," she said quickly. "Wouldn't want you to miss it." There was something in her tone. Something I couldn't quite place. "I won't," I said. A pause. Then she laughed softly. "You always were the punctual one." "I try." Anyway, she continued, "Mom and Dad are already here. Lawyer said we might start a little early if everyone's present." "I'll be there," I repeated. Okay, she said, drive safe. The line clicked. I stared at the road ahead. Drive safe. It sounded like concern, but it didn't feel like it. I turned onto County Road 17 at 9:18. It's a quiet stretch, 2 lanes bordered by fields on either side, not much traffic, especially mid-morning. I'd driven it hundreds of times, maybe thousands. I knew every curve, every dip in the road, which is why what happened next made no sense at all. It started with that sound, that hollow metallic clunk. At first I thought maybe I'd hit something, a rock, a piece of debris. Then came the vibration. Subtle at first, then stronger. The steering wheel trembled under my hands. I slowed slightly, frowning. What is that? I murmured. Another clunk. Louder this time. The front end dipped. And then, the world tilted. The left side of the car dropped suddenly, violently, like something had been ripped away. The steering wheel spun uselessly. The car veered hard to the left. I hit the brake instinctively, but the pedal felt wrong, soft, unresponsive. The sound was unbearable. Metal grinding against asphalt. A high-pitched scream that cut straight through me. Sparks flew past the window. The car dragged sideways, out of control. I remember gripping the wheel so hard my hands ached. Come on, I whispered as if the car could hear me. But it wasn't listening. Because it couldn't. Because it wasn't whole anymore. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye. Something rolling past me on the left. Fast, detached. A blur of black rubber and silver rim. My wheel. For a split second, my mind refused to process it. That doesn't happen, I thought. Wheels don't just come off. And then the realization hit. Harder than the crash itself. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad luck. Something had been done. The car slammed into the ditch. The impact knocked the breath out of me. Pain shot through my chest, my ribs screaming in protest. My head snapped forward, then back. The world went white for a second. Then gray. Then slowly, painfully back into focus. Voices. Distant at first. Then closer. Ma'am, can you hear me? Hands on the door. The creak of metal. Light flooding in. You're okay, someone said. Just stay still. I tried to speak. My wheel, I croaked. I know, the man said gently. We see it. At the hospital, everything moved in slow motion. X-rays, questions, bright lights overhead. Any pain here? Yes. And here, yes. A nurse adjusted my blanket. You're lucky, she said. Could have been a lot worse. Lucky? I closed my eyes. If this was luck, I didn't want to know what the alternative looked like. My parents arrived first. My mother looked pale, shaken, but not in the way I expected. Oh, Diana, she said, taking my hand briefly. What happened? I don't know, I replied honestly. My father stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. Car problems, he asked. I just had it checked, I said. He nodded, but his expression didn't change. Linda came later. Perfect hair, perfect makeup. She rushed in, eyes wide. Oh my God, are you okay? She said, hugging me lightly. I will be, I replied. She pulled back, studying me. You're sure? She asked. Yes. She exhaled, then glanced at my parents. Well, she said almost too quickly, thank goodness it wasn't worse. Thank goodness. Something about the way she said it made my skin prickle. A little later, as I lay there pretending to rest, I heard her step into the hallway. Her voice dropped. I know, she whispered into her phone, but she didn't make it. That's what matters. A pause. No, she's fine, just shaken up. Another pause. I said she didn't make it to the meeting. My heart stopped. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just listened. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted from confusion to understanding. This wasn't an accident. And whatever had been done to my car, it had been done for a reason. Part 3. The day. Everything fell apart. 1,047 words. Continue. Part 4. The will reading and the smile. I didn't attend my grandfather's will reading. That fact alone used to bother me, the idea that after everything, after all the time I'd spent with him, I wasn't even in the room when his final wishes were spoken out loud. It felt like a kind of absence I couldn't undo. But looking back now, I understand something I didn't then. If I had been there, things might have gone very differently. And not in a good way. I didn't hear about what happened at the lawyer's office until later that evening. Not from my parents, not from Linda, but from Mr. Halverson, my grandfather's attorney. A quiet, steady man in his 70s who had known our family for decades. He called me personally. "Diana," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I need to speak with you about what happened this morning." I shifted carefully in my hospital bed, my ribs still aching. "I assume the will reading went on without me," I said. There was a brief pause. "Yes," he replied, "it did." Something in his tone made me sit up a little straighter. And I asked. "Well," he said slowly, "that's where things become complicated. But before I tell you what he said, you need to understand what that room looked like. Because I've replayed it in my mind so many times it feels like I was there." The office sat on the second floor of a red brick building downtown. Neutral carpet, framed certificates on the wall, a long wooden table with enough chairs for everyone. My parents arrived early, as Linda had mentioned. My mother probably sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her purse resting beside her. My father, stiff-backed, impatient, checking his watch. Linda would have entered last. She always did. A small delay, just enough to make an entrance. I can picture her clearly, heels clicking softly on the floor, a polite smile already in place, eyes scanning the room to take in every detail. "Sorry I'm late," she'd say, even though she wasn't. And then she'd sit. Confident. Composed. Certain. Mr. Halverson began the reading at 10 sharp. That part I know for certain. He wanted this handled properly, the lawyer told me later. Your grandfather was very clear about that. The room would have quieted as he opened the folder. Papers neatly organized, every line prepared. "Thank you all for coming," he would have said. "We are here to review the last will and testament of Harold James Carter." A pause. Then the reading began. According to Mr. Halverson, the first portion was straightforward. Personal items, modest financial accounts, small bequests to extended family members. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Linda sat quietly through it all. Listening. Waiting. Because she believed she knew what was coming. She believed that if I wasn't there, if I had somehow failed to show up, then whatever had been intended for me would shift. Transfer. Disappear. She believed presence was power. And absence meant forfeiture. She was very attentive, Mr. Halverson told me. Your sister, watching closely. Of course she was. That's who Linda had always been. Not careless. Not impulsive. Calculated. As the reading continued, my name hadn't been mentioned. Not yet. And that apparently was all Linda needed. She smiled, he said. I felt something tighten in my chest when he told me that. A small smile, he clarified, but noticeable. I could see it. That slight upward curve of her lips, the quiet satisfaction. Not joy. Not relief. Something colder. Victory. My mother noticed it too. What is it? She likely whispered. Linda would have leaned in slightly. Nothing she'd say, just things are going as expected. As expected. That phrase again. It had been in her voice on the phone that morning. Now it was here in that room. A thread connecting everything. Mr. Halverson turned to the final section. The part that mattered. The remainder of the estate, he said, including the property located at... And then, a knock at the door. Sharp. Unexpected. The kind of interruption that doesn't belong in a room like that. He paused. Everyone looked up. Another knock. Louder this time. Then the door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. The room went still. Excuse us, one of them said, scanning the table. We're looking for someone. Mr. Halverson stood. Can I help you? He asked. The officer nodded, his expression professional but firm. Yes, sir, he said. We need to speak with someone present here. A beat. Then the question that stopped everything cold. Who here is Diana? I wasn't there to answer. Of course I wasn't. That was the whole point. But the silence that followed that question must have been suffocating. No one spoke at first. My mother probably looked around confused. She's not here, she might have said. She was in an accident this morning. The officer nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am, he said. We're aware. Aware. That word must have landed heavy. Linda, I imagine, felt it first. Not the fear. Not yet. But the shift. The moment when something doesn't go according to plan. When the script changes? She's at the hospital, Linda would have added quickly. She won't be able to make it. The officer's eyes would have settled on her. Is that right? He asked. Yes, she said, she's... Ma'am, he interrupted gently, we're not here because she missed a meeting. The room tightened. You could feel it. Like the air had been pulled out. Mr. Halverson told me my father stood then. What is this about? He demanded. The officer reached into his folder. We've received a report, he said, regarding a vehicle that appears to have been tampered with. No one spoke. No one moved. And then, we have reason to believe this may not have been an accident. Linda's smile disappeared. Not slowly. Not subtly. Gone. Back in my hospital room, I held the phone tighter. My hand was trembling, though I tried to keep my voice steady. What happened next? I asked. Mr. Halverson exhaled softly. They asked questions, he said, about who had access to your vehicle, about your movements this morning, about your family. My heart pounded. And I pressed. They said they would need statements, he continued, possibly further investigation. A pause. Then quieter. And Diana, they seemed very interested in your sister. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth stepping into the light. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to freeze a room. Enough to unravel everything. What about the will? I asked finally. Another pause. It was not completed, he said. Given the circumstances, we adjourned. Adjourned. Everything suspended. Hanging. Waiting. After we ended the call, I lay there staring at the ceiling. The hospital room felt smaller somehow. Closer. Like the walls were inching in. I replayed Linda's voice in my head. I said she didn't make it to the meeting. The satisfaction in it. The certainty. But she had been wrong. I hadn't made it. But not for the reason she thought. And now the truth was walking into rooms she never expected it to enter. Because what she and maybe my parents had believed was simple. If I wasn't there, I didn't count. But they had made one mistake. One critical, unforgivable mistake. They thought this was about inheritance. About money. About who showed up and who didn't. They didn't realize this was about something much bigger. And whatever they had set in motion that morning, it wasn't over. Not even close. Part 4. The Will. Reading and the Smile. 1,039 words. Continue. Part 5. The Truth Comes Out. There's a particular kind of silence that follows the truth. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind you welcome at the end of a long day. I'm talking about the kind that presses in on you, the kind that doesn't let you look away, the kind that forces you to sit still while everything you thought you understood rearranges itself. That's the silence I sat in the morning after the will reading. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of the machines and the distant shuffle of nurses in the hallway. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the floor in pale gold. It should have felt warm. It didn't. Because now I knew. Or at least, I knew enough. The police came to see me around 9:30. 2 officers, same ones who had gone to the lawyer's office, though I didn't know that at the time. They were polite, professional, careful with their words. Mrs. Carter, one of them said, pulling up a chair beside my bed, "We're glad to see you're doing all right." "I've been better," I replied. He nodded like he understood. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about your vehicle," he said. "Go ahead." They started with the basics. When was the last time I drove it? Had I noticed anything unusual? Who had access to the car? I answered honestly. "Just me," I said. "I live alone." "Anyone else with a key?" the second officer asked. "Number. Anyone who might have had a reason to approach your car recently." That question hung in the air. A reason. I hesitated. "My neighbor mentioned seeing someone near it last night," I said slowly, "but she couldn't tell who it was." The officers exchanged a glance. "That's helpful," the first one said. Helpful. That word didn't sit right. Not in this context. Then they asked about my family. It came casually at first. "Do you have any close relatives nearby? Did anyone know about your plans yesterday morning?" I felt my chest tighten. "My parents," I said, "and my sister." "And they were aware you'd be attending the will reading?" "Yes." Did you have any disagreements with them regarding your grandfather's estate? I swallowed. Not directly, I said, but there's been tension. What kind of tension? He asked gently. The kind you don't talk about in polite company, I thought. The kind that builds over years. The kind that doesn't need to be said out loud because everyone already feels it. Favoritism, I said finally. Resentment. The usual things families don't admit to. The officer nodded slowly. That's more common than you might think, he said. I didn't find that comforting. Then he reached into his folder. We've already spoken with the mechanic who inspected your vehicle, he said. Pete. He confirmed what you were told, the officer continued. The lug nuts on your front left wheel were intentionally loosened. I closed my eyes briefly. Hearing it said like that officially plainly, it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Do you understand what that means? He asked. Yes, I said quietly. Can you say it for the record? I opened my eyes. It means someone tampered with my car, I said, on purpose. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. There was a pause. Then he added carefully, we also have footage. My heart skipped. Footage, I repeated. From a security camera across the street, he said. A neighbor's system. It picked up activity near your driveway last night. My mouth went dry. Did it show who it was? I asked. Another glance between the officers. It showed a vehicle, he said, and a person exiting that vehicle and approaching yours. I gripped the edge of the blanket. And it's not entirely clear, he admitted, but we're in the process of enhancing the image. Enhancing. Processing. All these careful words for something that felt anything but careful. And there's more, he said. Of course there was. There was a phone call placed yesterday morning, he continued, shortly after your accident. My pulse quickened. A call, I said. Yes, he replied, from your sister's phone. Linda. To whom I asked. He checked his notes. A contact listed as Tom, he said. We believe that's her husband. Of course it was. And what did she say? I asked, though I already had a feeling. He hesitated. We have partial audio, he said. But what we were able to recover includes the statement, she didn't make it. That's what matters. The room tilted slightly. Not physically, but inside me. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It was confirmation. I let out a slow breath. I heard her say that, I whispered. The officers leaned in slightly. When one of them asked, in the hospital hallway, I said, she thought I was asleep. They exchanged another look. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement? He asked. Yes, I said. There was no hesitation this time. No doubt. They continued asking questions. About Linda, about my parents, about the will. And then finally the question that had been sitting just beneath the surface the entire time. Do you believe someone in your family may have been involved in tampering with your vehicle? I stared at him. At the calm expression, the steady eyes. He wasn't accusing. He was asking. Giving me the space to say it. To name it. I thought about Linda's voice. About the smile Mr. Halverson described. About the years of quiet resentment, the subtle digs, the undercurrent that had always been there. And I realized something. This didn't come out of nowhere. This was built. Layer by layer. Moment by moment. Year by year. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. I do. They nodded. No surprise, no reaction. Just acknowledgement. Thank you, he said. That helps us move forward. Move forward. That's what this was now. Not just something that had happened, but something that was unfolding. After they left, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. About Grandpa, about the folder he'd handed me, about what he'd said. Not everyone in this family sees things the way I do. He had known. Maybe not the specifics. Maybe not this. But something. Enough to prepare. Enough to protect. Later that afternoon, Mr. Halverson called again. They've asked us to delay the final reading, he said. I understand, I replied. There's something else you should know, he added. I braced myself. Your grandfather made a specific provision, he said, one that doesn't depend on your presence. My heart tightened. What do you mean? I mean, he said carefully, that whatever he intended for you, it was secured regardless of whether you attended the reading. I closed my eyes. Linda hadn't known. All of this. For nothing. They thought I had to be there, I said softly. It would appear so, he replied. A long pause. Then quieter. Diana, this may have been more serious than they realized. More serious. That was one way to put it. Because what they had planned, what they had set in motion, it wasn't just about keeping me out of a room. It was about making sure I never got there at all. And as I sat there in that hospital bed with the sunlight fading and the world shifting beneath me, I understood something with a clarity I'd never had before. They didn't just underestimate me. They underestimated the truth. And now that truth was out, there was no putting it back. Part 5. The truth comes out. 1,045 words. Continue. Part 6. Confrontation and consequences. They let me go home 2 days later. Take it easy, the nurse said as she handed me my discharge papers. No heavy lifting, plenty of rest. Rest. That word felt almost insulting. Because there was no rest waiting for me at home. Not anymore. The house looked the same when I walked in. Same couch, same curtains, same faint scent of lemon cleaner I'd used for years. The kind of normal that should have been comforting. Instead it felt staged. Like a life I'd been living without fully seeing it. I set my purse down on the kitchen table and stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. No machines, no footsteps in the hallway, no distant voices. Just me. And the truth. The first thing I did was take out the folder Grandpa had given me. It had been sitting untouched on my coffee table right where I'd left it before the crash. I picked it up carefully like it might break. Inside were the same documents I remembered. Property records. Bank statements. Notes in his handwriting. But this time I read them differently. Slower. More carefully. Like I was looking for something I hadn't seen before. And then I found it. A separate sheet tucked toward the back. Not official looking, not notarized. Just a handwritten note. My name at the top. Diana? If you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way they should have. I've made arrangements so that what's yours will remain yours no matter what anyone says or does. You've earned that much whether you believe it or not. Be careful who you trust. Grandpa. I sat down hard in the chair. The words blurred for a moment. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I did. He knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to leave me that warning. Enough to protect me in the only way he could. The phone rang just as I set the note down. I didn't need to look at the screen. I knew who it was. Linda. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. Hello? A pause. Diana, she said, her voice softer than usual. You're home. Yes. I was going to come by, she said. Check on you. That won't be necessary. Another pause. Longer this time. I think we should talk, she said. We should, I agreed, but not here. Where then? I thought for a moment. Then I said Grandpa's house. We met that evening. The sun was already starting to dip when I pulled into the driveway. The farmhouse looked smaller somehow without him sitting on the porch. Linda's car was already there. Of course it was. She was leaning against it when I stepped out. Perfect posture, perfect hair. But something was off, not the way she looked. The way she held herself. Tighter. Less certain. You look, okay, she said as I walked toward her. I am, I replied. She nodded. Good. We stood there for a moment. 2 sisters. A lifetime between us. I talked to the police, I said. No point easing into it. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. Then it smoothed out again. I figured you might, she said. They have footage, I continued. And your phone call. That did it. The composure cracked. Not completely. But enough. Diana, she said, exhaling sharply, this is being blown out of proportion. Is it? I asked. Yes, she insisted. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. The words landed like a slap. Didn't mean? So you did it, I said. It wasn't a question. She hesitated, looked away, then back at me. I just loosened them, she said. A little. Enough to slow you down, make you miss the meeting. My stomach turned. You loosened all 5 lug nuts on a moving vehicle, I said, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel. Do you have any idea what that could have done? I didn't think. No, I interrupted. You didn't. She crossed her arms defensive now. I thought you had to be there, she said. For the will, that if you didn't show up, it would go to you, I finished. She didn't deny it. You always had him, she said suddenly, her voice rising. You were always there. Always the favorite. I stared at her. The favorite, I repeated. Yes, she snapped. He trusted you, listened to you, gave you everything. I took care of him, I said quietly. You took advantage of him, she shot back. The words hung in the air. Ugly. Heavy. Is that what you told yourself, I asked? That I deserved this. I told myself what I needed to, she said, her voice shaking now. Because no one ever chose me. Not really. Something in me shifted then. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But understanding? A small, uncomfortable piece of it. And Mom and Dad, I asked, did they know? She hesitated. Too long? They didn't stop me, she said finally. That was answer enough. I nodded slowly. Of course they hadn't. They had spent a lifetime not stopping things. Not correcting. Not balancing. Just letting the scales tip, again and again. The police are considering charges, I said. Her head snapped up. Charges, she repeated. Yes. For what she demanded. I held her gaze. For tampering with a vehicle, I said. For reckless endangerment, possibly more. Her face drained of color. I didn't hurt you, she said. You tried, I replied. Silence. Thick. Unavoidable. What are you going to do, she asked. There it was. The real question. Not about guilt. Not about truth. About consequences. I thought about it. About everything. About the years. The patterns. The choices. And the moment on that road when everything could have ended. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. Her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. You'd really do that, she whispered. Yes. After everything she asked. I took a step closer. Because of everything I said. She looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. I never thought you would, she said quietly. I know, I replied. We stood there as the sun slipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was resolved. But something had changed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one carrying the weight for everyone else. I wasn't the one staying quiet to keep the peace. I was the one telling the truth. And whatever came next, it would be built on that. Part 6, Confrontation and Consequences, 1,036 words. Continue. Part 7, Healing Reflection and What Remains. It's been almost a year now. Long enough for the seasons to turn over. Long enough for the sharp edges of everything that happened to dull just a little. Not disappear, those kinds of things don't, but soften enough that I can sit with them without feeling like I'm going to break. People like to say time heals. I don't think that's entirely true. Time doesn't heal anything on its own. What it does is give you space. Space to understand. Space to decide who you're going to be after everything falls apart. The legal process moved slower than I expected. Weeks turned into months. Statements, interviews, meetings I never thought I'd have to attend at this stage in my life. Linda was charged. Not with everything the officers initially considered, but enough. Reckless endangerment, tampering with a vehicle. Serious. Real. Consequences with weight behind them. She didn't fight it. That surprised me at first. But when I saw her in court, really saw her, I understood why. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. But inside, like something in her had finally collapsed under the weight of everything she'd been holding up for so long. My parents sat behind her. Together. For once. But not united. Not really. My mother cried quietly through most of it. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight, like if he didn't move, he wouldn't have to feel anything. No one looked at me. And for the first time in my life, that didn't hurt. Linda accepted a plea. No prison time. But probation, community service, mandatory counseling. A record that wouldn't disappear. A mark. Not just on paper, but on her life. After the hearing, she approached me. Carefully. Like she wasn't sure I'd still be there. Diana, she said. I turned. We stood there in the hallway, people moving around us, voices echoing off the walls. "I'm sorry," she said. Simple. Direct. No excuses this time. I looked at her. At the sister I'd known my entire life. The one who had always been just out of reach. The one who had finally gone too far. "I know," I said. And I did. That didn't mean everything was fixed. It didn't mean trust magically came back. But it meant something. A beginning. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there for a moment. Two people who finally understood the truth of what had happened between them. The will reading was rescheduled a few weeks later. This time I was there. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to avoid it entirely, to leave it in the past. But another part of me, the part that had found its voice, knew I needed to show up. Not for the money, not for the outcome, but for myself. The room looked exactly the way I'd imagined it. Long table, neutral walls, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My parents sat on one side, Linda on the other. I took a seat across from them. No one spoke. Mr. Halverson began the reading again. Same words, same careful tone. But this time I heard it differently. Not as something being decided, but as something already set. When he reached the final section, he paused, then looked directly at me. As previously stated, he said Mr. Carter made specific provisions to ensure that certain assets would be transferred regardless of attendance. He opened the folder. The primary residence along with the surrounding property is to be transferred in full to Diana Carter. Silence. Not shocked this time. Just still. I didn't react right away. Didn't smile. Didn't speak. I just sat there letting it settle. Not because of what I had received, but because of what it meant. Grandpa had seen me. Not just the version of me that helped, that showed up, that stayed quiet, but me. After the reading, my parents approached me. Together. Again. A pattern they seemed to be trying on a little too late. We didn't know, my mother said, her voice trembling. I believed her. At least partly. You didn't ask, I replied. She flinched. My father cleared his throat. We should have handled things differently, he said. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest I'd ever heard from him. I'm not carrying this anymore, I said. They looked at me confused. The silence, I clarified. The pretending. The way things have always been. My mother nodded slowly. My father didn't argue. For once. Things didn't magically become better after that. That's not how real life works. Linda started therapy. I know because she told me. Not in detail. Just enough. I need to understand why I did what I did, she said one afternoon when we met for coffee, neutral ground, safe distance. That's a good place to start, I told her. We see each other sometimes now. Not often. Not like before, though, if I'm honest, there wasn't much of a before to return to. But it's something careful, intentional, real. My parents call more. Check in. Ask questions they never used to ask. Sometimes it feels genuine. Sometimes it feels like they're trying to rewrite something that's already been written. I let them. To a point. As for me, I stayed in my house. Fixed what needed fixing. Used part of the inheritance to repair the roof, update the kitchen, take care of things Robert and I had always put off. The rest, I set aside. Donated some. Helped a local program that supports seniors living alone. People like me. Or at least the version of me I used to be. Because here's what I've learned. Something I wish I had understood a long time ago. Being the strong one doesn't mean staying silent. It doesn't mean accepting less. It doesn't mean letting people take and take until there's nothing left. Family isn't defined by who shares your name. It's defined by who shows up, who protects, who chooses you, even when it's inconvenient. And sometimes, the hardest, most important thing you can do is choose yourself. If you're listening to this and something in it feels familiar, if you've spent years being overlooked or taken for granted or quietly carrying more than your share, I want you to hear this. It's not too late. Not to speak. Not to set boundaries. Not to step into a life where you are seen and valued and safe. You don't need a crash to wake you up. You don't need everything to fall apart. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one decision, to stop waiting for someone else to choose you and start choosing yourself. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think or remember or feel seen in a way you didn't expect, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need it. Talk about it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories, honest stories, the kind that stay with you, consider subscribing. Because no matter how late it feels, your story isn't over yet.